And we have a few participants joining us. Well, hello and welcome to Town Talks. I'm your host, as well as your mayor, Renee Morgan. We've got a really wonderful show here today. I'm so happy that you joined us. Today, we're going to be talking about the internet and scams and fraud. One of those things.
The internet is the most widely used communication network ever constructed. It's used by millions of people every single second of the day. There are good and bad things happening on the internet, and among the bad things are ongoing attempts to scam innocent people out of their money and identities. In Danville, we are not immune to their tactics. Whenever there's a slight opportunity to make some easy money, you can be sure that criminals are there laying ready to pounce on your information. The internet brings with it much opportunities, and fraudsters appear to be waiting around every virtual corner with the latest in online scams. While some forms of internet fraud have gotten very sophisticated, even some of the older, less advanced are still working. Ever hear of the "I'm stranded on an island and I need money, please help"? I've seen that one. Nicaragua, coming from all over the place. We've heard of all of these type of scams, and they've been around for years, but now they're getting more advanced and they still work. If people know what the types of scams that are taking place and what to look out for, we can hopefully save at least some of us from getting swindled out of our hard-earned cash. Today, I have a panel here that would put criminal minds to shame. I have today, my guests are from the FBI. I have Sid Patel, the Assistant Special Agent in charge of the FBI in San Francisco. I have Dave Mathers, Senior Inspector for Contra Costa District Attorney's Office. And I have Clancy Priest, the Town of Danville's Chief Technology Officer. And last but not least, I have Chris Elgas. He is an FBI agent, a special agent, I should say. And we are ready to rock and roll. We're going to go ahead and start right now. I'd like to start with our district attorney's office right here in Contra Costa County. Dave, thank you so much for being here today. We so appreciate it. One of the things that I'd like to ask you is about digital information. Now, I went and researched some of this stuff, and I'll tell you, I've got a book about this thick on different scams that are out there. And I was really shocked because some of these seem so simple, yet they're so sophisticated. What exactly is it that we need to do when we're talking about securing our digital information?
Great questions. Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. And I'm happy to speak with all of you about what's going on in this particular field, because as you watch the news, it just continues to evolve. And every day there's a new scam or a new technique or a new trick that's being put upon all of our various users of this technology. It's such a rapidly changing field in terms of the scam of the day can be one thing, and then minutes later you're getting hit with a new email or a new method of trying to attack your data. I'll tell you from my perspective, and of course I'm speaking from my own personal perspective. I'm not giving any legal advice, and my opinions are my own on this particular conference. I'm not speaking on behalf of the district attorney, but nevertheless, I have a lot of experience in this particular area in dealing with these. We see these types of scams being pulled on the citizens in our community on a regular basis, whether they're scams against individuals or scams against businesses. The unfortunate part is the internet allows suspects to reside anywhere on the planet and to come after us, after our data, after our information, primarily after our money. So things that I look at and things that I do in order to help people are to try to set them at ease, to say that you shouldn't think the danger's lurking around every corner, but you should kind of practice common sense in trying to protect your data and your information. I know various communities and businesses within our county are hacked on a regular basis, or at least their information is leaked, and bad guys are now using that against them. So advice that I have for individuals are not to be paranoid, but to practice precautions that you would practice similar to just your personal interaction. I don't leave my wallet laying on the seat of my car. So I don't in plain view because I think my car is going to get broken into. So I don't tend to leave data that I would consider to be somewhat valuable, easily accessible to people on the internet. I always look at emails that I receive to figure out that just looks a little strange. If it's from my child who happens to be traveling and they say that they're in a foreign country and they've been put into a jail, I probably consider that to be a little suspect. We personally in my own house have some methodologies for sort of validating. If a child of mine is in trouble, I might ask them a question and expect a certain response, kind of a two-factor authentication, which is a term that applies not only to your personal information, but also to digital information. So I don't want people to be paranoid, but I want them to have a layer of caution and realize that if they're not taking a view of requests saying, okay, why am I getting this request? Is this something I would have normally received? Is this something I expected? And are they asking for something that just doesn't seem to make sense? Then I'm going to more than likely say that goes into the delete box and I don't respond to whether it's an email or some other type of request for information.
What about elder scam? I mean, we're talking about ourselves, but, we didn't grow up with a computer. I know most of you I can look at and say we did not have computers when we were younger. And now it's a brand new world for a lot of us. And the elderly especially have never even, some of them don't even know how to use it. And when they see something on there about somebody needing help or, an insurance opportunity or whatever, do you see a lot of those type of cases as well?
We do. And I want people to realize that unfortunately, from my end, I'm just seeing the tip of the iceberg, that I think those scams are even more prevalent. And it's compounded by a couple issues. One is the elderly, as you mentioned, may not be as technologically savvy as some of our people who have grown up with technology. And they're also shut-ins, which over the last year and a half has occurred even more. So they're even more driven to using the internet to communicate and meet up and talk with relatives and other people. Elder abuse is a big problem because it would be embarrassing to admit that I think I might have been scammed, and who am I going to reach out to? In the child exploitation side, I use this term of like a golden ticket with my children when they were first getting on the internet, saying, if you feel that something's happening, you have a golden ticket to come to me and ask for help and to not be chastised or not be in trouble as a result of asking for help. I would relay the same information to the elderly parents or relatives of mine saying, if you feel that something's going on, don't feel that I'm going to chastise you, come and ask for help. Let me take a look at it. It may mean that I ask them if they'd be willing to let me insert some parental controls. And that sounds funny. Parental controls usually are the concept of using them to protect your kids. And now I would use it in reverse to try to protect my parents, so that if they are experiencing something, they can come to me and say, hey, I just got this email. I got a call about my computer's not working properly, and this person from Microsoft is willing to help me. And then very quickly, I'm telling them, unplug the computer and throw it in the trash can. So the reality is I will try to talk with people about, if you think it's unusual, if you think someone's asking you for money, ask someone else that you trust for advice to say, hey, I'm getting this request for this money or this information or getting access to my computer, and I'm not quite sure I should do that. What should I do? And then have that relative come in and help. And generally they'll find out, okay, this is a scam. You're not getting remote tech support for your computer by Microsoft. No, a relative is not in a jail in some foreign country. We will fix your computer. We'll take care of that and add additional controls to at least give them a chance to fight back and be not as easy a target as the next person.
You hear those commercials where the little boy's sitting there, he goes, Mom, what's your 401k, number, and, or something to that effect. Or you hear another one where they're, oh, I gave my social security number for this robe, that type of thing. And it seems so simple and everybody laughs at it when you see it. But there are people that really are vulnerable to that, don't even realize that what they're doing by giving out their address or their phone number. I heard another one where, people are asking for, hey, tell us your dog's name so that, or something to that effect, and then you go on there, what's your favorite, actor or something, and you go on and you click on it. Now all of a sudden they've been phishing and they have your information that you have and they can get into your accounts. The district attorney handles different cases, I'm sure, than the FBI, and as well as the town of Danville, we have cases, things that happen in our business as well. So tell us something that happens in the district attorney's office that you would say was unique or something that people should be aware of, a case maybe that you've worked on.
Well, cases that we deal with, what I'll refer to as a local level, there are generally some factors. If the suspect in a case is out of our area, whether it's international or out of the state, we're immediately going to leverage some of our relationships with our federal partners like the FBI in order to get better investigative reach. But many times cases we deal with don't fall at the dollar level that the FBI or a U.S. attorney would be willing to explore. Maybe the loss is only $10,000 to $20,000 single victim. Those would be cases that we would seek to prosecute with the presumption that we could identify the suspect. Many times for us, the suspect, it's assumed, would be out of the country, but we do find that a suspect may be local, and we have the ability to reach out and get in contact with that person and make an arrest, obviously for prosecution of a case. So generally our dollar limits are a little lower in what we deal with locally. We would deal with issues where if there was some form of a hands-on offense, but generally in the context of these cases, it's not a hands-on, there's never any physical contact between the person. I think there are some elder abuse laws that we have at a state level that the feds may not have access to. But many times we find out where there's one victim, there are multiple victims. And where there are multiple victims, they're both in and out of our county. And so then we reach out to our partners like the FBI and say, hey, we've got a case that we've started with this number of victims, but we're finding that there are victims all over the country. We're going to do some deconfliction or find out if the FBI has a case open so that we can then dovetail into that particular prosecution. Because again, the internet gives these suspects the ability to connect from anywhere. And if they're anywhere, it's harder for us as a local agency to get into contact with that suspect. And so our federal relationships really help us in that regard.
Yeah, there's, you were talking about being sheltered for the last year and a half. And, there's people out there that, are still wanting to meet people or go on a date with somebody or single. And, you can't blame them, right? They're going on these internet sites and they're, looking for romance. And people are getting scammed doing that as well. It's bad enough you can get scammed by somebody in the real life, but when you're on the computer, it's even more difficult to handle. And people are embarrassed about that. I'm sure that a lot of people don't want to come forward and say, I went on an internet site for romance and got scammed. Tell us some of the things that can happen there. And is that something that you would handle if somebody got scammed on a romance site?
Yes, we would handle that, but we'd at least start the initial investigation. There's an advantage being an investigator in Contra, Costa County. I'm here, I'm local, and I'm available. I serve as a resource, both myself and my coworkers, to all the various agencies that are the city agencies and county within Contra Costa. We would attempt to go out and make contact with that person. And whether a romance scam involves an attempt to get money from the original victim or to use that victim as a conduit to then victimize other people. And I've seen that happen on occasion where we started an investigation thinking that our suspect was in Contra Costa and then found out they were a secondary victim. They were the romance scam original victim. And then they were being used as a conduit to make contact with other victims and start receiving packages, start receiving money, and then basically resend that back to the original suspect. We will start those investigations and make that contact and attempt to help those people. And you're absolutely right. Whether it's embarrassment or it's something that they're just not willing to admit that they were looking to speak with someone. But generally when it involves, okay, now provide me your personal information, your bank account, what's your address? I want to send you a gift. I'm going to send you some money in the form of a check so that you can cash it and then buy me a ticket to fly to meet you, which turns out to be the check is fake. I deposit it as the victim in my bank account. I then buy them a ticket to somewhere. I give them the information. Then the suspect changes that ticket and cashes it in. And my bank calls me a few days later and says, that $4,000 check bounced. We're taking the money out. And I'm also out the money that I've, in a sense, resent on. So there are lots of different scams. There's as many scams out there as there are suspects, it seems like. So that can happen on a regular basis. And again, generally that suspect is not in the country. They're saying, hey, I'm in a different country and I want to come meet you. And they will spend hours and hours grooming and working on that victim to establish that relationship. And as you mentioned earlier, glean personal information so that they may try to do some form of reset. Usually they won't come straight out and say, I need all your passwords to your accounts. But hopefully, and we talk about it maybe later, password reuse and how we can help people with that. You mentioned when we were talking earlier about having to reset a password on an account, and we'll talk about some of those things, I think, in this call a little later. So those are scams that we see in our county and across the land on a regular basis.
It is so scary. I mean, you just as recently they had a scam that was happening here locally, where the people were going door to door and selling, whether it was a chocolate bar or a magazine subscription to help them, for their education or whatever it was. And they had a credit card reader. So apparently what they did is they took the information when the person, they get your heartstrings and put the information down. All of a sudden now they have all of your information, credit card information. And by the time the person or the perpetrator left, they found out that their bank accounts were completely empty by the time they left, because they had it was their debit card. So interesting scams that can happen. It amazes me though that, why can't they get a real job instead of trying to scam the rest of us out that are actually making an honest living, right? So,
some of the people that do these scams, when I end up either talking with them or learning about what the nature is, sort of think to myself, wow, such an intelligent mind, why wouldn't they put it to good instead of to evil? And you mentioned something, and I want to touch on that just ever so briefly. I caution all my relatives and anyone who will listen, I never use my debit card outside of the context of my bank. I don't use it, especially at a gas pump, because the gas pump can have a skimmer. And generally, when you use a credit card at a gas pump, it asks you to enter your zip code. But if you enter your PIN is 4 digits, your zip code is 5. And if the scammers are able to intercept your PIN, they'll see it as a 4-digit. And you're right, draining of the bank account can happen very quickly. At least when I'm using a credit card, I have the protection of the Visa, the MasterCard, American Express, Discover, to help me fight that and counteract that and reverse the charges. When it's my bank account through a debit card, it's very difficult. And I have seen that where people have lost a lot of money and then they're trying to argue with the bank, no, I have my card. So I never use my debit card, especially at gas pumps or anywhere that's not one of my branch banks. I realize, hey, it's the risk is too great.
Yeah, good advice. Good advice, because I know I've heard of a lot of people that have gotten scammed like that. And it's interesting because you touched on the credit card reader. I think we'd like to get into that a little bit more in the conversation later on, because I think that's important for people to understand as well, that using your credit cards in certain areas can be just as detrimental as if you didn't give the information out. People get it that way as well. Scammer is not, or a skimmer is what you're calling it, right? Where they get your information and move forward. Very scary stuff. I wanted to go ahead and move on to the FBI. And I wanted to welcome both of you, or we are thrilled to have you here today as well. And both of you know that we've talked about local. So obviously you're handling more of the bigger dollar amounts, is from what I understand and all that. So can you tell us some of the scams that you've seen that have really stood out to you that we should watch out for?
No, absolutely. And first of all, thank you for having me here. My name is Sid Patel. I'm one of the assistant special agents in charge for the San Francisco office. Just a quick general background, the FBI, we have 56 nationwide field offices to include Hawaii and Alaska. Of those 56, we're the 6th largest. And being the Western regional financial hub, San Francisco and the Bay Area, so much money coming in and out, we have some amazing cases, and along with having Silicon Valley right in our backyard. So with that being said, yes, there is a slight differentiation to what the U.S. Attorney's Office, our prosecuting arm, will often take for cases versus sometimes at the DA's level. But we work very closely with Dave and his team for many of our cases. And we've had many cases that start at his level and come to the federal side, and vice versa, that are at the federal side. And we work hand in hand with them to prosecute them through the DA's office. So they do fantastic work. Some of the cases, you actually indicated them all right here: the romance scams, the elderly scams. We see all kinds of investment fraud and all kinds of scams. As mentioned, I mean, I will tell you from the complaints that we received in 2020, we had over $1 billion in losses from these different types of scams, mostly elder scams. And some of you may ask, why the elder scams? Well, 65 and over, they didn't grow up with the internet age. It's an easy target, and that's where the money is. For instance, we have a receiving arm called IC3. It's the Internet Complaint Center, but it's literally at www.ic3.gov. And that's an important website, because if you ever fall victim to a scam or see a potential scam, we'd like you to go there first and try to report the information. You can always call our FBI offices as well at 415 553-7400. But with the elderly scams, it's situations like, you won the lottery. Please contact us. You've got a large sum of money just awaiting your just to go into straight into your bank account. But first, you've got to send us some money. And what I've noticed with all of these different types of scams, it all has to do with give us money first. Can you go ahead and send us a small sum of money of $2,000, $3,000? It'll pay up some of your portion of taxes, some of your transportation fees, whatever the shipping fees are, to help allow for this inheritance or this lottery money or whatever it may be. It could be a family member, as Dave mentioned, that's calling in. It's someone pretending to say, oh, your son, he's in jail, he needs money, he's in a foreign country, he's lost his passport, please send some money over right now. And the romance scams, the same thing. It's literally, especially during lonely times, especially for often single individuals, they want to make reach and have contact with someone that appears to be individual that's interested in them on the other side, when it's really not. As opposed to a beautiful female or a handsome male, it's actually maybe a 14-year-old or some other individual that's in a foreign country pretending with photos. And multiple things happen. And one is they'll either ask them as a conduit, as Dave mentioned, which we call a money mule. There's even a movie by Clint Eastwood called Money Mule that's kind of focuses on that piece as well. But that's exactly what they do, where they have them be the transporter of money or goods or whatever it may be to someone else, to be an arm unknown to them, unbeknownst to them, for carrying out this criminal activity. And then you've got individuals that, through the communications, they solicit for photos, maybe a photo of you, maybe a photo of whomever it may be, but something that's incriminating, something that is embarrassing. And we see that a lot. I didn't grow up with the internet age, so some of this is new to me, but often people will send photos of themselves, whether it be naked or whatever it may be. Next thing you know, the person on the other line who's pretending to be the person you're romantically interested in will come out and say, well, send us $1,000 or this photo is going to go on the internet and you're going to be embarrassed. And you'd be surprised at how many people fall for that and how many victims call us because someone else has your photo. So
They
those
also,
are
and the interesting thing about that, Sid, is what you just mentioned is there's another one where they put on there, have you seen this video of yourself, right? And then people have clicked on it and then it automatically gets their information as well. So there's so many, and luckily, I know I haven't done anything crazy in the last, I don't know how many years. So I know that there's no video out there.
Right.
It would be a pretty boring video, but it's interesting because I've seen people say, and then I'll ask them, hey, I think you've been hacked, right? Because
Yes.
they receive these videos. But I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, we've had in 2020, we had almost $300 million in losses from the calls that were coming in through IC3.gov. And that's only the calls that we're receiving. There's probably thousands of calls that are going elsewhere, or going straight to Contra Costa at the DA's office, or going to other DA's offices, but there's just a lot of losses. And I feel horrible for these victims, especially the elderly that fall for these.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
In addition to these types of different crimes, I mean, there's a whole gambit. I've seen it where telemarketers will contact an individual, often elderly, and say, you've got a virus. Please send us money, $20, $30 here, and we'll give you a virus scan. But during that time, they're distracting you and they're trying to get certain accesses to your computer, and they're trying to get in and get bank information, records, whatever it may be, and you're not seeing it because they've shown a screen on the computer that's hiding what they're actually looking at inside your computer. So there's all kinds of tactics.
It's crazy out there. I had one from my bank that said that my account had been suspended. And I was looking at it and I thought, why would my account be suspended? And it looked just like my bank's, the logo, everything. I didn't click on it. I called the bank right away and I said, can you tell me what's going on? They said, that is not us, don't click on it. So, I mean, had I not been a little bit more aware of these, I would have clicked on it and said, what do I need to do? I would have put my info in, trying to get my account back up again. It's the same thing like with PayPal or any of those other accounts. They say your account's been suspended, click here, or Amazon, and they look very real until you look at the email address.
That's it.
And then you know that it's not them. What about bank fraud. I mean, can you talk a little bit about bank fraud?
Absolutely. And there's multiple types. One thing we see is called business email compromise. And I will tell you, we've had victims in Danville, without giving names. We had a victim here that almost lost about $1 million. Luckily, we were able to get in time, freeze the assets, and get the money back to the victim. This happened to be an individual that was buying a house in the Danville area, expensive homes here. They were putting a large amount down. And for whatever reason, the bank that they were working with, someone on the inside or someone elsewhere, was able to realize that they were buying this house, sent them a fake email and said, please send your money as part of the deposit for the escrow, as opposed to this title company here, to this banking and routing number. So they did that unbeknownst to them, thinking that was from the title company that they were working with, sent the money over. Then the title company in their conversation says, we never received anything. Luckily, they called us, and we have a 48-hour window where if we're lucky enough to get it within 48 hours, if it goes to certain parts of the world or certain locations, we can call those locations we have overseas and try to freeze those assets. And that's what happened here. We were able to freeze that almost $1 million, get it back to the customer. But that is heart-wrenching, the idea of losing that money. One thing I want to do while we still have some time is Chris Elgis, with his 13 years in the FBI, and just to give an idea of the experiences that we bring to the tables, most of our agents come in the Bureau in their early 30s. They've got a whole previous career, usually in the private sector, military, whatever it may have been beforehand. And so Chris, in his 13 years of working as a special agent in New York and working here, has prior experiences, 13 years here, and he's done some amazing work, some of which is actually on the national security side that was being briefed to the White House. And so he's done some amazing work there. And then here on the criminal realm, working criminal cases like white collar, he's got some great examples here. And so what I wanted him to do is kind of run through examples of when he's received information, what we've done as part of the FBI. There's a mystery to what the FBI does, but the truth is it's very similar to what Dave and his team does and what all the other teams do when we're investigating crimes, or when we're working with different victims and trying to come to terms with things and have a final resolution. So I'm going to give the helm to Chris here to give a couple examples. We're very excited to have him here, and thank you for taking time.
Absolutely, Chris. Thank you. Really appreciate you being here, and welcome.
Of course. Good morning, everybody. Thank you, sir, for the kind introduction. I mean, as the FBI, we see a lot of different types of cases. And one that I was thinking of for this that was appropriate or applicable was a advanced fee scheme fraud case that we got. And the lead comes in actually from our local partner, one of our local district attorney's offices, send it in, talk to us about it and said, hey, this is what we're seeing, whether they weren't going to move forward on it or we're going to actually lean on us based upon the numerous victims outside of their area of responsibility. So from that point, we do the intake, review it, see if it meets, what we're looking for in terms of criminal violation on the federal level. And that's when we start doing what we do best. We get on the ground, start talking to people, interviewing witnesses, victims, start combing through records, and then we start engaging the U.S. Attorney's Office to determine, potential charges after we've identified our subject or subjects. In this case, an advanced fee scheme is essentially a promise to individuals. Individuals or victims will provide money with the promise of something in the future, a gift, and in this case, a loan. So good rate of return, trying to start a business. All you have to do is put some money down for that loan. And we'll start the process. Con artists are great. They know their craft. Like Senior Inspector Mathers had said, they're quite intelligent. And they a lot of times have honed their craft to unfortunately to victimize people. So after we get to the prosecution stage, we're working with our victims, victim services, as well as the U.S. Attorney's Office to hopefully get it to a great resolution for those victims. So it's an opportunity for me to work with those victims and hopefully provide some justice for them as they see the subject eventually face the crimes that they've committed.
I just, it just baffles my mind that, when you talk about somebody purchasing a home, or you talk about the innocent things that we would do, that we would normally do when we're sitting in somebody's office and you're signing the documents, now everything has gone to the computer, how they have really polished that craft to be able to do that. It makes you wonder, how can you protect yourself? Is there a way that when something like that, what are you looking out for? I mean, as a victim, that could happen to anybody. What do you look out for?
I absolutely agree. I think it's a very challenging world, especially with the internet, where you're constantly being inundated with emails, texts, and all of them look extraordinarily legitimate. I think one of the things too, you rely on your family, your friends, and law enforcement. If something doesn't seem right, reach out to your local police department, your local district attorney's office, the FBI, our other federal partners, and just ask. I think something Senior Inspector Mathers had said earlier was sometimes that shame keeps people from discussing it. And that's why I think it's important for families to have those conversations to stop that bleeding, because it is, a cliche saying, but if it's too good to be true, it probably is. And I think just having those conversations with people to do kind of a quick check and a little bit of the two-factor authentication of, is this right? Is this normal? Does this seem something that I should take part in? Helps to have somebody else with maybe a clearer head. In addition, so much information is out there on scams. Just doing a quick internet search is also very helpful.
It's very true. Very true. I know for a fact that, when I get them, the first thing that I do is I send them over to our police chief, and he gets a lot of them. And I also send them over to Clancy Priest, who is our Town of Danville Chief Technology Officer, and have them to take a look at them and to also know what type of scams are out there. Because I know that if I'm getting it, I'm not the only one that they're targeting. They're targeting a lot of other people. So I think it's so important that we all work together to know what those scams are. The more information we have, the better we are to catch them. So to move on from there, if you don't mind, I'm going to go ahead and move on to Clancy. And I wanted to welcome Clancy this morning as well. The different perspective that we have here this morning, you have everything from the district attorney to the FBI. Let's bring it local and let's talk about, Danville is a business, and it's something that they will definitely, these scam artists are out there trying to get in and trying to get into our accounts. And it's happened a few times. But we have Clancy at the helm, so we've been really well protected. And so I wanted to start with Clancy. There's a lot of stuff out there. One of the things that we've been dealing with is ransomware. And can you kind of explain how that works in a business situation like what we have? And I've got you on mute, so I'm going to unmute. Well, let me unmute you there. I've got a T-shirt that says that. You're on mute.
Yeah. So. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity. Ransomware for us in the business of trying to keep an organization safe and sound, ransomware is the biggest threat to us. And we are, just to give you some perspective, the town is attacked probably multiple thousands of times a day. And we have firewalls and other things in place that repel these attacks. They're getting very, very refined. One of the things that I subscribe to a number of Department of Homeland Security, FBI, cybersecurity leads that inform me daily of what the newest attack out there is. And myself and my staff, we look at these, we read them, and they give us some hint of the things that are going on. And a good example is, folks need to understand these bad guys out there are looking constantly for vulnerabilities. So they are scanning all kinds of networks and pushing this button and pushing that button and seeing if there's a door somewhere open that they can exploit. And this happens. It's happened to us here in Danville several times. The best thing you can do is just keep a vigilance. If you see something suspicious going on, almost the same as folks at home, if they see something strange going on with their computer or whatever, then that kind of gives them a heads up that something's not right. And we are constantly doing that, because no matter how many protections you have in place, you know, there's always the chance that something's going to get through. And what we do is we scan our network constantly. We have our firewalls in place, and we constantly inform our users of new threats that are going on out there. We have a number of, one of the things we do is we have a system called Know Before here in the town that sends out faux hacks to our users just to see if they'll click on them. And that tells us where we need to maybe put a bit more education for our users. There's things of that nature.
Interesting world we live in. I mean, so what you're saying, but from a business perspective, we've done all that. What about from a personal perspective, somebody that is at home, what should they be doing?
Well, they should first and foremost make sure that they have antivirus and anti-malware system in place on their computers or tablets or whatever they're using. There's a number of just certain things. Well, the main thing I want people to understand is that they need to think, they need to read before they click on something. That's very important. There's one thing I'll show you if you'll allow me. I'm going to share my screen on an email and show you just a small trick that I like to inform people of. Can you see my email screen?
I can.
All right. So anytime you get an email, this is an email from the Department of Homeland Security letting me know about some of the bad guys out there. So anytime you see a link such as this in an email, one quick way of checking it is to roll your cursor over it. Well, it's for some reason, because I'm sharing, it's not doing it. But if you roll your cursor over a link, a little box will pop out, and that box will tell you where it's going to send you. And a lot of times you can see right away that it's sending you to someplace that's not coherent to the link that it's showing you. Another thing to understand is your bank, financial institutions, things of that nature will never ever send you an email saying you need to re-log in, or you've been breached and we need to make sure that your credentials are correct. That's never going to happen. So any email of that nature, right off the bat, you know, it's something you shouldn't click on. Another thing is
the IRS too, right? Don't you? There's something about the IRS will never send you anything, correct? So
no institution, whether it be financial or governmental or anything of that nature, will ask you for your credentials in an email. They just won't do that. That goes almost without saying. Just if you see something like that, get rid of it. Another thing is that, you know, as it's been stated, multi-factor or two-factor authentication, wherever you can, in anything that you do business with or have interaction with, if it has the ability to implement multi-factor or two-factor authentication, you should do that. A good example I'd like to give people is, you know, two-factor authentication. People say, well, what is that exactly? A good example is your ATM card. So you have your ATM card. That's one factor of authentication that you put in the ATM machine. The second factor of authentication is it's going to ask you for a PIN. That's a simplified two-factor authentication. When it comes to when you're doing stuff online, you can log in and then it will say, we're going to send you a text with a code that you need to enter. So what this does is if the bad guys happen to get a hold of your credentials and they start using them and that two-factor authentication is in place, they're going to get to the system with your credentials, but that system is going to say, we're going to send you a code on your phone. They don't have your phone. So they're not going to let you in. That's the type of thing that you really need to be, cognizant of. If you can get that implemented, it's a big help.
So one of the things that I, when I tried to put out the information for this program was to talk about phishing, and I wrote on there "gone fishing,"
Yeah.
and that's a word that kind of encompasses everything that you're speaking of. Is they're fishing for information, and very scary. And I think that that's great advice for all of us to take a look at, especially from a business perspective that you're in charge of. The other thing is the CEO fraud, and I know that that's a big one as well. That asking for money. Can you kind of give us an idea of what that's all about?
Well, it's there again. It's the bad guys out there trying to dupe people into sending money here, there. That's another thing that you will not see an organization like Bank of America or Wells Fargo or any of those will be asking you to send money or to wire money someplace. That's just, if you get an email like that, the best thing to do is to delete it. If the bank or someone else needs, some financial institution you're doing business with needs you to transfer money, they're more than likely they will be either sending you a letter or calling you. They're not going to be doing it over an email. That almost goes without saying. My philosophy, or what I advise my friends and family always, if it smells fishy, delete it. Just err on the side of caution. One of the things I like to tell people is that, look, if it's something legitimate that you happen to have felt it was fishy and you delete it, you're going to get a second email or a third email, or they're going to send you a letter, or they're going to call you. So if there's just the slightest inkling that you're uncomfortable with something, just delete it. Don't take the chance.
The thing is, though, is a lot of times, if we're not in your positions, we have a tendency sometimes to do stupid things. And I think that's a good way to put it. And we'll click on something and we'll think, well, that's legitimate. That's somebody I know. I know just recently, I had a bunch of people call me and say, I understand you want to talk to me about something. What's going on? And I'm like, okay, I didn't realize I wanted to talk to you. And first thing I did was contact, our IT department, because they were using my name with a number, and they were asking people to respond and that they needed to speak to them. And it's interesting because my account wasn't hacked, though. So what is that then? When somebody uses your information, just like on Facebook or any of those other accounts, what is that?
It's a funny little word that we use. It's called spoofing. And so people get spoofed at times. They'll get a hold of your email or some form of your credential, and they start using it. They pretend that they're you. So the best advice I can give people is, if that occurs, if they have other people calling, as in your case, whether you had people contact you saying, why are you asking me for this? Then go in, change your passwords, number one, just to be on the safe side. Number two is people need to understand that if you know someone, but for example, Mayor, you know me, if Clancy all of a sudden asks you, I need you to verify something about on Facebook or whatever, then if you know that person, that they wouldn't, if you suspect that they wouldn't be contacting you through that avenue, that's your warning right there. That's where all the flags come up. And at that point, you need to start contacting, for example, as you did, you contacted us, contact someone, the FBI, the police department, someone has got your credentials, and be sure that you try to protect yourself. The key to a lot of this is, the biggest scam that I tend to see out there about is the Facebook scam, where you all of a sudden you have someone that's your friend on Facebook, and you get a notice that they want to be your friend. Mm-hmm. Right? That's the most common. That's kind of a surefire that you're being spoofed through Facebook. a lot of the times people on Facebook also, it kind of makes me crazy when I see these things. They get them to play little games on Facebook. What was your favorite song in the 70s?
Right.
What's your favorite name for a dog? Things of this nature. People need to not engage in those sort of things on Facebook. That's
Right.
really, that's people out there trying to get your information.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because it's the same thing with the videos that you receive, and they'll say, click on this video. And I see that, and I think the same thing. Why are people, they'll send it. It's like, do you know somebody with COVID or somebody that's had COVID? And the COVID scams are out there, and the stimulus checks and all of that. So, I wanted to open it up to questions because, this information is so valuable for everybody. And not only is it valuable at this moment in time, but this video is going to be available to be viewed on numerous occasions for anybody that would love to, look at the information and review it again. But let me go ahead and see if Nicola or Diane, if we have any questions from people in general, or any questions that have come in.
I'm not seeing any questions that have come in, but I'd just like to ask, if you have clicked on a link in an email and you want to check your computer, what should you do there?
Who should, is that, so if you're clicking on a link and
you're not 100% sure that it was a legitimate link, you have suspicions, you feel like you shouldn't have clicked it, what should you do?
Okay, that's a good question. Anybody have an answer to that? Let's just open it up.
Just the other day, I even professionals, a lot of times we have to sort of pull ourselves up short because something looks very legitimate. And I got an email that looked like it was from Microsoft. And incidentally, at the same time, we had been changing some of our rules within our system. So it looked like a Microsoft link. And it looked very, very legitimate. And I almost clicked on it. So, it's not, some of these are so refined. If you click on something like that, the surest thing to do is scan your system. If you have like Malwarebytes or some of the other antivirus systems, scan your system right away. That's what I do, just to make sure nothing got through, to be double sure. And then contact, in the case of if you're on a business computer, contact your IT team. Another good example, and I think we touched on this in part of our conversation, is you can go on to Google and try to find out if there's a scam going on that you know about, and then contact law enforcement if you feel like you've really been hacked.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. What about backing up your data? Isn't that important as well? I know that a lot of times your iPhones and your computers in general will have an automatic backup. Is that also something that we should be doing, is to make sure that our information is backed up?
I would advise folks to back up their systems. We back up, for example, the town systems, we're backed up twice a day. Just in case something happens, that we can go back and restore something.
So if I can, we've got another question on here. The best home computers security applications. I know you probably can't name names, but maybe you can kind of describe what we should be looking for when we're looking for that type of thing. Dave?
Sure, you're absolutely right. I can't make it necessarily a commercial endorsement, however. I do know that many of the large service providers, the Comcast, the AT&T, other types that are in our area, in order to sort of reduce the number of tech support calls they receive, they realize it's to their best interest to provide some level of free security. Many of them will provide a free subscription to some of the very large named service providers that provide software security, antiviral, anti-malware. So I would recommend, if you're paying for your service through one of those providers, you may want to go to that. If it's a Comcast or an AT&T, go onto their page, look for the free security apps that they're advocating and providing a subscription. And at least that gives you a starting point. It's definitely better than no security at all. There are other freeware apps that are available. And as was mentioned, you can go on to Google and look for some of those applications. I'd look for some of the reviews to kind of do a comparison. Some of the magazines publish articles that compare some of the free antiviral software and find something that you can install to give you at least somewhat of a fighting advantage. And many of those companies are actively looking for the latest threats and then updating all their client software as quickly as they can, because it's an ongoing battle. The virus tomorrow is unknown, so the antiviral software will get adapted in order to counteract that on a regular basis.
So Dave, you're mentioning about the different, what's the up and coming scams that are out there, and from a more of a local level, from what you deal with, what do you see are some of those scams that we're dealing with right now?
Well, the trouble is that they change so quickly. They all have a very common theme. And as was mentioned earlier, the common theme generally is, can you pay a small fee in order for us to either broker this or to pay those taxes or to pay some initial piece that establishes access to your account? And as was mentioned, if it's too good to be true, I've never won the lottery in a remote country. And so I'm not expecting that when I get an email about that I'm going to follow through on that. And it's just out of the blue. The trouble is we get so many of these on a regular basis that it just becomes the norm. And when do you think that it might be a real one or not? And I'm generally realizing I'm not subscribing to these things. I'm not playing the lottery in a foreign country, so I'm probably not going to win that lottery. We're seeing those on a regular basis. I'm happy to report that in general, most of our citizens in the county are probably recognizing, okay, that's just a little weird, or their software is filtering it out automatically. Even Microsoft and the other big software providers for email are picking up on that and establishing filters that move it into your junk email box, so that you're not seeing it at the surface and going, okay, is this real or not? Because it could become overwhelming. To get 100 a day, one's going to sneak through. There's no way I can be 100% effective against it. So fortunately, we're using the tools, we as a public, to our advantage in order to provide some layer of protection against just the onslaught of emails. Because let's face it, if I'm a bad guy in some foreign land, I can send emails for free. And so if I send 10,000 in a day, if I'm buying email lists, if I'm sending 10,000 and I get 3 responses, which is pretty low when you look at 10,000 as a number, but all I need are 3 targets, and now I'm on to the races. I'm starting to engage with that person directly.
So you mentioned, that what to look out for, but Sid, you mentioned about the 48-hour time frame. And a lot of us, when you're embarrassed about being scammed, you don't pick up the phone and call your local police and say, I think I've been scammed. The majority of people aren't, which we're learning now that we probably should be. But when you talk about the 48 hours, why 48 hours, and why is that so important to report it within 48 hours?
Right. So when the money's transferred, wire transferred, there's actually a 48 to 72 hour window. I like to say 48 because you lose time. If someone plans for 72, it's often longer than that. But there are certain hubs like Hong Kong and some others where when the wire is being distributed overseas, we have the capability with the partnerships over there to be able to stop those funds from going any further. However, if it's after that time frame of 48 hours or 72 hours even, then it becomes harder to do that because the money is already left. And often these individuals, once the money is left, they've already retrieved and withdrawn the money as well. And that makes it very difficult because there's just a short time frame. And there are some situations where you're going to certain hubs where we just can't get to them. So you have to be very careful where you're wiring your money. And the first thing is contact your bank when that happens. Let them know they have certain avenues as well. And then contact us. We have a special team back at headquarters that has the contacts, calls overseas offices, and works with the partnerships with the foreign governments to try to freeze those assets.
And Chris, you deal with it in a different method. I mean, it seems to me like you've got more of an international or broader spectrum on all of this. What do you see going on, and what would your advice be?
Oh, wow. Well, especially with like the business email compromise, the romance scams, we do see a lot of those. We get a lot of those calls coming in. And as been discussed, that does, once that money's gone, it does hit internationally. It's heartbreaking too, to talk to these victims who have lost their money. And a lot of times it's also the kid's inheritance. Romance scams are difficult because there's a bond and a love that person has for somebody. Unfortunately, that person is just fictitious. So we see a lot, and especially being in this area, the dollar amounts are quite high, just because, especially with the older individuals, they've had a long time making money and have a savings but they also don't have the ability to recoup that. So
Right.
it is very, it's very, very heartbreaking for sure.
Yeah, it's to me, it's one of those things where, you know, I feel horrible, and I realize though that they're crooks, you know, or criminals, whatever you want to call them, that are doing this. So they don't have a heart. They just want the money. They don't care who it is. They just want to get the money. And so I think that that's for us that are, you know, have that heart. We're thinking, how could you do that to somebody? But it's there, and we all need to be aware of it. I think we have another question from the audience. Oh, I mean, Clancy, did you want to respond to that?
Well,
as well?
I just want to point out, it's kind of a pet peeve with me. The scam that's gone on for years and years is you get an email about, say, your car warranty or something you totally unsolicited.
I get calls about that.
Right,
all the time,
right.
Clancy.
And you get an email from, you know, something out of the blue, and it'll say, if you want to opt out of this email, click here. Well, people need to understand that a lot of these bad guys out there just do a blast, what we call a blast email on a name. And whenever someone clicks on that, I want to opt out, what they've just done is verify to the bad guy that email is valid. And when I'm a bad guy and I want to sell emails on the dark web to other bad guys, I can say, hey, I've got 1,000 here that have been verified. These are real emails to real people, and I can get more money for that. So what I caution people is be very careful about opting out of an email. Make sure it's something genuine.
So that's different though than unsubscribing.
No, it's the same. That's what I'm saying. If you want to
So
unsubscribe,
it's the same. So
it's the same
that's
thing.
the
Sorry.
same thing. So when
Yeah.
somebody says, I want to opt out or I want to unsubscribe, and you click on that.
Yes.
So basically you're, you know, the
You
other
just
thing I know,
verified yourself. Yeah.
there's the other one where they, I saw one that has, like, if you click on something with, for instance, you know, there's a movie star and they say, you know, they say some crazy thing about it and people click on it. They're getting people to click on that so that they get your information as well.
Right.
So to be really careful. And a lot of times, you know, you think you're on a legitimate site, and you know, you get on these sites and you send your money for something, and all of a sudden it never shows up. Your product that you ordered never showed up, and they've got your credit card information, and now they have your address and they have your email, because now you filled out that whole sheet for them. But the point behind that I'm trying to say is, you know, it is embarrassing for anybody to say, oh gosh, I fell for it, right? But I think it's more so to what Sid's saying as well, is time is of the essence to make sure that you're backtracking that you're getting that information out to the legitimate business, you know, like the FBI, the district attorney, to get it out to the police department, to talk to your IT people and let them know,
Right.
I clicked on this, or I sent my information. Now what do I do? And I think that's a scary thing. So once, say for instance, I fill out that whole form and I put in there my email address, I've got my credit card information, and I realize after I click it, I'm not getting my product that I ordered, and time has gone on, and you know, you're thinking it's a legitimate charge and you don't get that product or whatever. Now what do you do? What do you do? Sid?
And one thing to add to that is make sure, as you know, people have assets, quite a bit of money in Danville, from what I've seen at least. With that being said, check your credit reports. Do it once a year, do it twice a year. Go to Experian, go to TransUnion, go to Equifax, but make sure no one's opening up credit cards that you're not aware of, and messing with your credit, right? So that's very important as well. But just be diligent. It's very easy to be a victim of a scam. It's very easy to want to say yes, to want to click on things on the web. Just be diligent. That's really what it comes down to.
It is. It definitely is. And I know that we have a question from the audience. Diane or Nicola?
Yes, Mayor Morgan, we have a question. What is the best home computer security application?
Okay, we answered that one already. We had that one. So we answered that one. I guess everybody's curious to find out what they can do to protect themselves. And so, you know, it's one of those things where just be sure, like I think Sid said, make sure that you're checking your credit. Also, you know, I think it's important to know that if you receive emails that do not look legitimate, to make sure that, what about changing your passwords on a regular basis? Is that important as well? Or how often should you be doing that, Dave?
Yeah, I can speak to that because we were talking about that offline a little bit earlier. Not only changing them, but password reuse, using the same password for multiple accounts. Boy, passwords are difficult to keep track of. At last count, I think I had over 400 unique passwords for accounts that I maintain. And you think, how are you going to keep track of that? All right. Now, if I'm at home, putting them on a little notepad is at least some advantage. A piece of paper next to the computer, of course, presuming I keep my house secure so no one can come in and start looking at the passwords, a visitor. But nevertheless, most of these smartphones have applications that allow you to keep track of passwords. And as you're being asked to change passwords, it gives you an opportunity for the application, the little password utility, to suggest a very strong password. I will tell you the first thing is I cannot remember any of these passwords because they're so unique. They're not using any words that are in a dictionary that could be guessed. They're not using the name of my pet, like when those Facebook posts ask for what's your high school and name of your favorite pet, and pretty quickly they have all my resets. So I'm using the application to generate very, very unique passwords with dollar signs and exclamation points and numbers and uppercase and lowercase and many characters, 16 characters or more, so that the password isn't guessable. And when it comes time to change it, some of the applications, I'm assuming if you remotely connect into some of the Danville town applications, it might ask you every 90 days to change your password. I don't add a 1 at the end of the password because that's not sufficiently strong. I will totally change that password. And yes, it becomes a pain. Yes, I'm always looking at my phone to look up what the latest password is for the system I'm logging into, but that's a good strategy. I'm not using the name of my pet and my address at my house to become my password because someone could guess that. They could look online and find where I live, get that information, or I could have logged into a compromised site that I didn't even recognize. It seemed legitimate. It was a forum talking about something that I'm interested in, and it said, we're going to create an account for you. What password do you want? That password now is in the hands of the potential hackers, and they can try to use that to get into my Yahoo account or my Gmail account or my Comcast. So using unique, strong passwords is the first line of defense against these hackers who are trying to get in and masquerade as you, steal your personal information, and then open accounts in your name.
You know, I'm just listening to all of this and having sat here with all of you and the education that I've received from listening to this and just the tips of what I've heard. You know, it's interesting to me because we're all vulnerable and we're all sitting in a situation where, you know, this is new to us or a new application comes up or something like that. And I think the word to be vigilant is so important to protect your computer with various, you know, protections on there and you know, malware and, you know, ransom and this. And I mean, there's so many, like I said, I pulled up, you know, papers this thick on everything from, you know, scams to phishing to whatever it is. And I think that we, you know, what we do is we need to take this next step back and say, if this happens to you, contact your police, contact your IT, go back in, change your passwords, to take an opportunity to say, I need to make sure that I advise people of this. Time is of the essence. Make sure that you're notifying your banks to do all of those things and to stay safe. You know, we're a trusting community. You were talking about leaving your wallet on the front seat. We did a kind of a little survey of our own and people had left their iPads and their purses on their front seat. And when the police department showed up and said, you know, how did this happen? You know, there's no glass broken. Well, I left my door unlocked and, you know, to my car. And of course, you know, they come over, they pick it up and they walk off and there you go. It happens every day. It happens to all of us. It's nothing to be embarrassed about. It's nothing to look over. It's something that we all need to be aware of. I want to thank all of you for being here today, for keeping us much safer on the internet and as well as any other form of computers or phones that we're on. Thank you so much. And to all of you here today, remember to stay positive, test negative, and keep in touch. We'll see you in September. Bye-bye now.